We have a very tight schedule because we do think the administrator will be arriving for 2:30, and we've got two important things to do before that, so we would like to get started. And the first bit of business is to announce the election results and to thank those of you who took the time to vote. Thank you very much. And so I can announce the results. John Hurd, George Hill, and Franklin Moore have all been reelected to the board. Joining them will be new board members, Chris Crowley and Nancy Tumovic. And if they could all stand up if they're, I know I've seen Chris, and Nancy was here this morning, but I didn't. Oh, Nancy is, oh goodness, this is not a good sign. Oh, and there's George. And John Hurd, I know I saw, he's here. And Franklin is here, I know, so thank you. Thanks, and there's Franklin. Thank you very much. They will be, we thank them for stepping up to join the board, and they will be joining the two existing board members who did not have to run this term, and that's Tish Butler and Barbara Seligman. So we're really pleased to have all of them on board. And just lastly, when the search begins next summer for new candidates to volunteer for the board, we hope that many of you will step forward. We cannot remind you often enough that everything the UAA does is because of the efforts of its volunteer members. So please think about stepping up. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Betty Cook, who is the chair of the Alumni Awards Committee, and thank Betty for having done a fantastic job this year in organizing the committee. So thank you.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? But you can't see me. That's good. Okay. Now, I find a lot of friendly faces out there, so let me just ask for your help because you are so friendly. We've had a good lunch. This is a little too warm, cozy room. If you find your neighbors nodding off, nudge them because I want them to hear what I'm going to tell you are winners of the Alumni of the Year Award. It's exciting, they're good, and I want you to hear about it. But before I do that, let me just thank the awards committee for the many hours they devoted to selecting these candidates. We have Carol Peasley on the awards committee. I'm looking around. Well, I'll just mention Nancy Pillmeyer. We have also Diane Titsos. I don't think she's here, nor Elzadia Washington. But then we have two ex officio members, which is Nancy Tumovic and Frank Almaguer. I know those two are here. I want to give a special thanks to Frank. He was my predecessor, and he guided me through the initiation year for me, so I really appreciate that. And equally important, I want to thank those of you who took the time and effort to submit nominations for excellent alumni who've both at home and abroad who have worked well for this, and also for writing up such well nominations, and for the winners who all performed so well. So with that said, though, what I would like now to do is to tell you, we have every year since its inception in 2014, the Alumni of the Year Award has been presented by your UAA to winners, to people whose path we have followed as they continue to do the kind of work they do and taking new paths at home and abroad, and to help other people in their community and others. So we give them an award each year. It's a handsome world table clock by Howard Heller, who it has an engraved plaque that has the winner's name and the award being given. So we've given two this year. There's going to be one for domestic service and one for international service. The real challenge the awards committee did have this year was selecting from a treasure trove of really excellent candidates. But by consensus, they selected our 2 winners, so they are tops. I want you to know that. So, this year's winner of the USAID Alumna of the Year for Domestic Service has built her advocacy for DC's homeless on direct knowledge of and experience with the homeless and underserved community and the organizations that serve the community. This included her early volunteer work serving as a court-appointed special advocate for an abused teen originally from Guatemala. It also includes volunteering with several food kitchens, working with homeless individuals to help them solve their survival problems, and learning the workings of government support programs and its internal politics. Awareness raising and coalition building throughout the community have been key components of her work. She has applied her years of experience in strategic planning, project design, and skills building with USAID to train and assist the homeless here at home. I'm pleased to announce the USAID Alumna of the Year 2017 for domestic service is Marcia Birnbaum. Marcia, have a seat here. I want to talk more about you, okay? I want to give you a little bit more information about Marcia so that you'll agree with what your awards committee came up with. Since 2012, on a pro bono basis, Marcia has been deeply involved in assisting and advocating for homeless and low-income individuals in Washington, D.C. Her passion for human rights and social justice, nurtured during her USAID career, has led her to service with a variety of grassroots organizations, as well as with nonprofit, focused on the plight of the homeless. Her most significant current relationship is with the People for Fairness Coalition, a grassroots advocacy organization established and led by individuals who have been or are currently homeless, whose objective is to end homelessness in D.C. through advocacy, outreach, and peer mentoring. She is becoming well known in the D.C. government as an energetic spokesperson for honoring and other needs of homeless persons living. You know what, folks? I could do this better if I had my glasses on. Do you mind? Thanks. When I was younger, this wasn't necessary. That was an energetic spokeswork for housing and other needs, you see? Okay, of homeless persons living in shelters and on the streets. Reflecting her efforts, a bill was introduced by a D.C. council member in April 2017 that aims to provide clean, safe public restrooms available for everyone, including the homeless, in downtown D.C. Marcia is in the final stages of a case study requested by the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless, which will help chart the organization's course for the next decade. In combining her empathy for less fortunate with the planning and implementation skills gained during her USAID career, Marcia is truly a model for all of us. Congratulations, Marcia. Now, okay. Now, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, just a few words.
Step back here.
Sure. So, I don't know if you remember the period of furlough induced by Newt Gingrich way back when. So I was sitting at home one day, not long before my RIF, thinking about what did I want to do after aid. And I decided that there were tremendous needs in my own city. I wanted to get involved in development. And after Eric died and I got involved, I spent 15 years trying to combine doing international consultancies with development in D.C., and that was not very satisfactory because what I wanted was one-on-one contact with individuals after years of designing and implementing programs for multi-thousand. And so 5.5 years ago, I said, you know, what are your passions? They're human rights and social justice. You don't need the money. And so I decided, the reason I decided to focus on the homeless, it was the population I least knew in Washington were African Americans. And I thought this is a great way to get to know people of different cultures. And so I started in the soup kitchen. And I'm an ISTJ, you know what that means, somebody who likes clear orders, et cetera. And I threw myself into a sea of ambiguity and just let it flow. And one thing led to another. And I took the choice, instead of doing activities for the homeless, to work alongside a really incredible group of people who are doing amazing work. So here I am, fast forward 5.5 years later. We have a downtown DC public restroom initiative launched by PFFC. I've trained a group of members, and we go out and give presentations. We had the good fortune of having somebody who is passionate about this, who runs a PR group, to help us produce good PowerPoints, far better than anything I ever produced in AID, and to practice giving presentations. I wish I'd had that learning. It's been fascinating. Last night, the night before, I was at 2 ANC meetings lobbying to get them to promote the bill, learning all about advocacy in a way that I had not. And the biggest privilege is getting to know some amazing people. It's very easy to stereotype the homeless. I won't go into it. Many people work. Many people have degrees, some don't. But I just want to finish by sharing with you one vignette. Last night, we were in Glover Park presenting to the ANC. You're familiar with what an ANC is? It's a group, and their support is important. The DC Council member who's going to be taking the biggest role is Mary Che of Ward 3. And I was accompanied by George Olivar. George is Mexican, came to the States, worked as an accountant, and then along the way, he decided to become a Buddhist. So he spent 15 years in Burma, 4 years in Australia, came back in his early 60s, not very employable, had Social Security, and he ended up in a shelter. And he's been an active member of our group for a long time. So after the ANC meeting, I assume some of you are familiar with the DC Current paper. A young woman from Australia came up and said, I'd really love to do an article on what you're doing. And I said, yes, well, I'd like to introduce you to George. And she was fascinated. So each person is different. I really feel very privileged to do this, and thank you very much. So I should sit here? Oh.
Okay, congratulations again, Marcia. Next, we have our second awardee. This is the Alumnus of the Year for 2017. When I give you a hint about what he has done, you'll probably guess his name right away, but I'm going to give you hints anyway, okay? This year's winner, while performing outstanding domestic and international post-retirement work, is being recognized as the Alumnus of the Year for his predominantly international service. In his retirement, the awardee has used the skills and contacts made during 25 years with USAID, serving in the fields of health, population, and nutrition, and while working for the World Bank to improve the health of the marginalized in Africa. After leaving the World Bank, he entered the world of non-governmental organizations. By the way, as a public relations person, I abhor acronyms. Everybody knows that as NGOs, but I won't say that. NGOs, where he continued champion maternal and child health and nutrition efforts in Africa. He also started raising awareness in the United States of the perils of climate change, where he has focused on the ramification of climate change and the need for policy and lifestyle changes. As a full-time volunteer, he continues to contribute his time, energy, and money for the common good of humanity. If you haven't already guessed who the winner is, I'm pleased to announce the USAID Alumnus of the Year for International Service is Ray Martin. Ray? Have a seat. I'm going to talk more about you, okay?
How about a hug first?
Ray began volunteering for a small fledgling network of Christian organizations involved in health in developing countries, that is, Christian Connections for International Health. Ray facilitated interaction between Christian Connections member organizations and catalyzed partnerships among them. Because of his past work experience, he was able to build bridges and foster collaboration between the faith sector and the larger development community. Ray was elected to the Christian Connections Board and later appointed its executive director. Under his 14-year leadership, Christian Connections members' organizations grew from 25 to 175, and individual memberships increased by several hundred. Donors also took notice of the organization's successful projects in Africa and started awarding grants to Christian Connections for its Africa projects. During this period, Ray also participated substantially in the work of International Health Section of the American Public Health Association, where he was elected by his peers to serve as chairman of the International Health Section. Ray later received the highest award from the International Health Section, the Carl Taylor Lifetime Achievement Award in International Health. He has held varied positions in the organization and today serves as historian and also as co-chair of its climate change working group. After his wife Lou Ann's death, Ray took time to discern how to spend the rest of his life in a way that reflected his values and interest. He wanted to use his time and talents to make a positive difference in society, especially among the poor and marginalized. Ray has established $1 million Lou Ann Martin Legacy Fund for maternal and child health and nutrition with Mennonite Central Committee, a church agency his wife worked for when they first met 45 years ago. This fund supports projects using community health workers who address the needs of mothers and children in Africa. Moreover, to demonstrate his commitment to the climate change issue, he pledged $1 million toward the establishment of a Center for Sustainable Climate Solution, which is being coordinated by Eastern Mennonite University, which works across the Mennonite Church and beyond at multiple levels and in many institutions for both mitigation and adaptation to climate change. Additionally, Ray has become active in the Northern Virginia Sierra Club and the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. He also accepted the co-chair of the Climate Change and Health Working Group of the International Health Section of the American Public Health Association. Congratulations, Ray. Would you like to say a few words, too? Good. And here's your world clock.
Wow.
Step up here.
I need a clock to keep track of my time and everything I'm doing. But Betty, I want to give you a suggestion. So I don't have to wear glasses. This is how large I print my notes.
I should learn. I could enlarge my fonts too, couldn't I?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, this is a real honor. I presume that many of you in this room, at the stage of life that you're at and I'm at, are not doing what we're doing to seek rewards, and in many cases, perhaps not even pay. But we're committed to various causes, and so it's an honor for me to be recognized by my peers for my post-USAID continuing commitment to international development. So thank you, everyone, for this recognition. I also want to say, we heard a lot of good things this morning about USAID. I'm going to add to that. One of the reasons I chose to work for USAID in the first place, coming out of a Mennonite farm background where I wasn't used to people working for the government, is that the whole raison d'etre of USAID is to help people. And that was a commitment that my community recognized. And so I didn't get the pushback that I might have gotten if I had worked for some other federal agencies. So working with people like you who are committed to a cause, I mean, for most of you, I'm sure you didn't see this as just a job or a way to make money. I even use the word calling. And so it was a pleasure for me, and it continues to be a pleasure to work in the international development space, to be surrounded by people who are really committed to to building a better world. Staying involved, of course, in retirement, I'd have choices of going on several cruises a year, playing golf, going fishing. But I think staying involved professionally, at least for me, is a way of, first of all, staying healthy, and there's good evidence for that, by the way, and also continuing to feel that I have purpose in life, and what I'm doing is continuing to make a difference. And my last point is, there are many of us, I'm sure not everyone, but many of us are fairly well off. USAID salaries aren't bad. World Bank salaries aren't bad. Christian Connections for International Health was a little different maybe. But with the power of compound interest and investments grow, and I decided, particularly when my wife died, that I wanted to use assets that were greater than I needed for my own old age security to work for objectives that I have a passion about. And rather than doing what many people do, write in their wills that their assets will go to whatever they feel deeply about, I wanted to be part of the action. And that is the reason why I set up these two programs in maternal and child health and climate change that you talked about. And so I have the pleasure, while I'm still healthy and still living, to be an active part of using my financial resources to make a difference in areas that I do have a passion about. So that's for those of you, or at least for me, it was very satisfying. It is very satisfying to be able to do that. And my last point, thanks to someone who urged me to say this morning, I'm still involved. I think I need the clock because I'm leaving tonight for the annual conference of the American Public Health Association, whose theme this year is climate and health. And I'm moderating a couple sessions and facilitating 2 more. So it never ends for me. So thank you very much. You need a picture? Do you want?
No, just don't you want just them? No, I got him. I want a picture of all 3 of you.
Okay, Betty. Yeah, Betty, come on.
It's hard to get photographs of because the podium. Why don't you move this way so we don't have raised
that millennials use. They're awesome.
Really awesome.
I wouldn't do that to most of you, but they are awesome.
If you want to support public restrooms, call Mary Chang. We can give you
And one final word. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay. And one final word, since we do have a little time, I guess. Okay. But I do want to encourage all of you to think about your friends and your colleagues here in the Alumni Association and the activities they're doing. We know that there's a rich reservoir of this kind of talent out there, and we're going to have this program again next year. So think about them and submit a nomination for next year's program. We really, truly appreciate it. What you must know that recognizing people like Marcia and Ray and our other colleagues here in the organization, our better angels, if you will, is really something that the organization appreciates doing and enjoys doing, as well as its members and the board. So do send us some nominations next year. We'll be in touch with you, so you'll have plenty of time to think about it. Thank you. Okay. The administrator has shown up and is getting mic'd downstairs. They'll be here in just a moment. I think I'll take this moment to say how much we appreciate the work of several board members who've been guiding us for many years, and I would highlight specifically Carol Peasley, who just walked out when I wanted to to honor her, and Alex Shakow. These two people have been they have been the adults on the board member on the board, and have really given us extraordinary leadership. And particularly Alex, you'll be continuing for some time in the role of scribe. 18 months. So we got at least 18 months more out of Alex, which is great. Hey, Malcolm. So when the administrator comes in, I'll introduce him. Is there any questions anybody wants to ask in advance? This happened last year, too. I had to... Anybody know a good joke? That's a good question.
We got a little bit of misinformation because his advance person had gone downstairs to pick him up, and I think he's expected to arrive in just a moment.
Okay.
He'll be coming upstairs, and Alex, is there anything you'd like to say about the history project?
That would be a good moment right now.
No, just I reiterate what. No, I just want to reiterate what Carol said this morning, which was how grateful we are to those of you who have pledged and also provided the support for the USAID History Project. This is something that's from this podium 2 years ago, or was it 3 years ago, that Peter McPherson talked about. He said that we are losing too many of our good people, and we ought to get some of this down so that the history of USAID can be told, the experience of USAID over nearly 60 years. And so we took that on as a challenge, and I am deeply grateful to those of you who are here and to many others who are outside who are not here today for the support that's making this actually possible. We didn't think we would necessarily get to that point, but the combination of finding John Norris ready to do it after we encouraged him for about 18 months, and he finally succumbed, I'm delighted to say. And then so quickly the people who had pledged resources came through. So we need more participation. I would urge everybody to participate. And I've told people that the range of contributions is between $25 and $25,000. And all that you need to do is somewhere in between. That'll be about halfway through, would be just very nice. Now, seriously, we need more resources to make sure we not only get the history done, but we get it published, and then we get it moved on into be using it for educational and other purposes. So we need more, but we are grateful for the support we've had so far. And I think for a project of this magnitude, I mean, for this organization whose annual budget is about $20,000, to have $180,000 in the bank to do this history means that it is a very big commitment on the part of everybody. And we'd like to have as much support for it in terms of people feeling some identification with it, even if the project that you worked on in Malawi in 1999 doesn't get mentioned in the history when it's ultimately published. Now, I know you were in Malawi. I mean, that's our one fear, is that people are going to be upset when their project is not mentioned in this history. It has to be a very selective history. But I think it's a very exciting thing to be able to tell the story of AID. I think you've all been part of it. We want to make sure that that word gets out in a way that's understood. And you heard this morning a very eloquent reason why it is very important to keep that history, get that history better known and keep it going in the future. So I thank you again all for your support, and we look forward to what the results are 18 months or 2 years from now. But you'll be getting reports on it as often as we have something to tell you that's useful and helpful, and we'll be coming to you for help. As John said, I mean, he's at this point, he's not, he's just collecting material and talking to people, but I mean, looking at materials, but we'll focus him in on particular issues when he is ready for that and point him to the people in this room and elsewhere who can help him. So thank you all very, very much. What? You look in your package of papers, and there is a page that is very clearly headlined in red, telling you that the project has begun and we need more help and we want participation, and it tells you exactly how to do it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah. We could certainly do that. Nancy Pielmeyer and Barbara Seligman. These are the two brilliant women who've pulled this all together. The reason that these two panels this morning were as good as they are is because of the hard work that the two of these women did in pulling together a committee, but mostly their leadership and their hard work. And so I really think that you did a fantastic job. Today was wonderful. And we have lots of other people to thank, too. Like who? Well, I did want to, I mean, what I could do right now is say what I would say at the end of, what's going to say at the end of the day, which is that we greatly value the leadership that Nancy and Barbara exerted in leading this AGM committee. We also want to thank all the members of the board, the executive committee, the various committee members, the volunteers, for what you do every day to bring the USAID Alumni Association to life. Our many panelists and speakers deserve great thanks, along with all of you today, our members and guests. I will say that we're going to be sending out an evaluation survey for the annual general meeting a couple of days after this meeting, and we do hope that you'll fill it out and get it back to us in short shrift, because we will listen to it. We need your feedback. And I would just also say finally that the UAA is only as strong as the volunteers who do all the work to ensure our success. And so to help us in continue expanding our membership, what we want you to do is look around this room and notice who's not here, who might be eligible to be a member, and encourage them to join the association and become contributing members. And don't forget, anybody who's worked for, I think, 18 months in USAID is eligible to be a member of this association. We love more members from all cohorts: Foreign Service, AD, SPSCs, fellows, FSNs, and Foreign Service people too. So we need your help in continuing to grow this organization. It's had a great start 8 years ago. 8 years? 7, 8 years ago, I think. 10 years. Wow. And of course, those of you who were there remember that it was basically the brainchild of former Administrator Henrietta Holzman IV, who we had a rumor she might show today, and we were excited, but maybe she's back there sitting with Administrator Green. But
Our thanks to the Center for Global Development. They've been really extraordinary supporters of this association and providers of, as you can see, the best facilities we could possibly want. And Scott and others from, and the whole team basically from CG have really given us great support, and so we're greatly appreciative of that.
I know we'll have these evaluation forms.
Mhm.
One question I have, to what extent does the Alumni Association now have a direct contact with AID? That is, you know, we talk about what happened in the past, et cetera. Do we have any mechanism for advising or giving help to AID today as a operating organization?
Yeah. I personally am not aware of that connection, but
Mentoring?
oh, well, I'm sorry. I was thinking that at sort of at a high policy level, but we do have an active mentoring program, and we're looking to double the size of it, actually, as mentioned before, where.
And we have been asked to provide people for various, when they were doing some thinking. In fact, I think we will hear more in a bit about some of the reform work that staff is doing internally within AID. And they were trying to review some historical periods. And they asked the UAA to help identify people to come in and talk to them about experience in the 90s and at various other times. So they do contact us when they have information on.
Carol, I think that you need.
And of course, we contribute to the oral histories of ADST.
If you're talking about a policy role with AID, no, we are independent and we are not lobbyists for. This is an independent organization. We have informal contacts, and we've been called. I mean, Larry Garber, when he was still running, where is Larry?
Right there.
He was looking at local. What was the term? Local solutions. A group of people were pulled together from alumni for the purpose of providing advice based on experience. And when asked, we do that. We offer opportunities to. We have young professionals here today who are, we hope, learning a little bit about what happened in the past as well as looking to the future. And we look to the future too. You had people on these panels looking to the future.
Absolutely.
And in the next, after the administrator speaks, that there will be another panel that will look to what's going to happen to AID in the future.
Exactly.
What they know of it.
Yeah.
I'm only speaking because it's time, but I am a mentor.
Okay.
I'm already doing that, but I don't want us all to be like the old British soldiers talking about the past. I still think there's so much talent that we have. We have all of these panels coming up with good things. I would like to see how we can influence him.
Okay. Thank you, Irv. Thank you. Good afternoon. This is the part of the day we've all been waiting for. It's my great pleasure to introduce our next guest, the Honorable USAID Administrator Mark Green. He was sworn in as the 18th administrator in August of this year. And as you know, he brings to USAID an incredible array of experience as the president of the International Republican Institute, as the president and CEO of the Initiative for Global Development, a nonprofit organization devoted to corporate partnerships in Africa, as a senior director at the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, a well-known leading advocacy group supporting U.S. engagement in the world, including robust 150 account funding. As a U.S. ambassador to Tanzania, as a four-term congressman from Wisconsin who helped craft important international development legislation, including for the Millennium Challenge Corporation and PEPFAR. and a public member of the Millennium Challenge Corporation Board, and a member of multiple groups, including IMFAN, which urges increased aid effectiveness. In all of these capacities, he's been a strong proponent for U.S. investments in international development and a supporter of USAID. Thank you, Administrator Green, for all you have done, and we will continue to do, and what you will continue to do for the development community. And thank you for joining us today. And thank you, George Ingram, for agreeing to help us with sorting through the questions, making sense of the questions that people have written down, and being able to work with the question and answer session. So, Mr. Administrator, please come up.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to see all of you here. So I'm sometimes asked what it is like to be doing what I am doing when I am doing it. I like to recall the story of the millionaire's pool party. So the story goes that a millionaire had a party at his home, and it wasn't just any home, it was a home with a gorgeous swimming pool. And it wasn't just any swimming pool, it was a swimming pool filled with man-eating alligators. And the millionaire said to his guests, okay, I will give $1 million or the hand of my daughter to the first guy who can swim across this pool. No takers. But as he turned to walk away, of course, he heard a splash. And in fact, there was a guy in the pool fighting his way across, kicking the alligators to the side, eventually getting to the other side, getting out, dripping wet. And the millionaire ran over to him and said, you know, that is the most courageous thing I think I've ever seen. So what's it going to be, $1 million or the hand of my daughter? And of course, the swimmer looked at him and said, neither. I just want to know who the hell pushed me in the pool. So a number of you here are guilty for pushing me in this pool. And I want to thank all of you for doing it. Seriously, lots of thanks to begin with. Thanks to all of you for your service. And I mean that very sincerely. I am blessed to be where I'm at and to come into this role, and largely because of the great work that all of you have done over the years. I am standing on your shoulders, and I am grateful for all that you have done. I am even more grateful for what you're continuing to do, your continued service after leaving USAID, and it means a great deal. I want to thank CGD. I have not been here for a while. The place is all spiff and shine. It's good to be here again. And this is, of course, a place that contributes so mightily to the work that we do in thinking through and making sure that we at USAID and we, the U.S. government, continues to be cutting edge and to be the best at what we do. I'm also delighted that USAID's young professionals are being included in these sessions. The seed corn that we have for the future, extraordinarily important. I mean, the world is challenged. As was referenced, I was until a few months ago the president of the International Republican Institute. The chair of the board of IRI is Senator John McCain. And McCain begins every board meeting by saying, my friends, the world is on fire, so what are we going to do about it? Well, the world is on fire, so what are we going to do about it? That is what we're all dealing with these days. So I was confirmed 3 months ago today, precisely. And I think of what I have seen in these last 3 months. I go back to, 6 weeks ago when we at USAID deployed our 6th disaster assistance response team to deal with the earthquake in Mexico City. We had 6 out simultaneously for only the second time in the entire history of the agency. I was down in Mexico City just last week and got to see firsthand how important the work is, how great the damage was, and the extraordinary friendship that was really fostered and engendered by the work that our team did. My friend Andrew Natsios, who I saw a few weeks ago down at Texas A&M, said to me, you know, one of the things that no administrator going in fully appreciates is just how important the work of our disaster response teams are. And he said, he said, believe me, you don't know how great it is. You will see. I have seen. and it makes a world of difference. Another part of my 3 months was my first overseas trip. Sudan, Ethiopia, South Sudan. In Sudan, I saw how important our work is diplomatically, as I knew from my days as ambassador, but now see from the other side. The work that we do in so many parts of the world is the juice of diplomacy. In so many parts of the world, what we do and what we are capable of doing provides the diplomatic leverage that we bring to host countries to incentivize reform, incentivize respect for those values that we all care about. After Sudan, I went to Ethiopia, and I got to see the work that our Feed the Future programs are doing and some of the resilience building that we're doing. The fact that Ethiopia, after 3 consecutive years of drought, has not fallen into fully fledged famine. And a good part of that is because of the work of our teams. The food security technology, know-how, technical assistance, and financial support has made a world of difference. And the Ethiopians know it has made a world of difference. And then I went from there to South Sudan. And a lot of takeaways from South Sudan. Sometime later on, after a beer or two, I'll talk about my session with President Kiir. It's not for the faint of heart, but the message that I delivered to him was clear-eyed and very straightforward. And we'll see if it makes any difference at all. But my biggest takeaway from South Sudan is the admiration that I have for our team and the team of our partners working under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. These are courageous men and women, and they are patriots. And again, they're working under the most trying possible circumstances. I visited an internally displaced persons camp and met with some of those who were trying to provide some sense of normalcy to life in a camp. And they talked to me about one area that they had sort of separated out of the camp facilities, and they were going to modernize them so they could have some semblance of services. And as they were getting ready to do it, 12,000 IDPs arrived on one day and just sort of blew through any chance that there would be to present normal services. And I remember meeting with a lot of families, and those families still hold out hope that they'll get to go home someday. Security prevents that right now, but it was strikingly in contrast with those I met in Darfur in the camps. Not a one of them thought they would actually get to go home. And again, all of these are good men and women who are in impossible circumstances, and we, all of us in the USAID family, do our very best to try to provide some kind of humanitarian service and support. It was also important to me because I would say the greatest realization that I've gained in my brief time is just how great the humanitarian needs are at the moment. My background is more on the development side, but when you have 66 million displaced people in the world, with the numbers growing each and every day, when you have so many people in camps in different locations, camps in what you and I know are camps but don't visually appear to be camps because the walls have all been sort of blown apart in terms of the sheer numbers. That challenges our very model of providing support. We're all sort of raised on a bilateral model, and you sort of in an orderly way go about things. Not so much in many of the places that I see in many of the places that I visited. So those have been those first 3 months. So what are we going to do about all of it? Well, at USAID, one of the most gratifying things I see is just how mission-oriented our team is. People know why they come in the door. People believe in a cause. They believe in the importance of our work as a tool in the toolbox of American foreign policy. And they believe that we have a chance to make the world a little bit better. And so what we're trying to do at USAID is to keep building on the great work that's been done and to strengthen and reform our tools so that they are sharp for these extraordinary challenges that we see. Many of you have seen that the approach that I bring, and my philosophy is, I believe that the whole purpose of foreign assistance should be ending its need to exist. And what I mean by that is that we need to build the capacity of our partners to help them on their journey towards self-reliance. Every human being that I have met, and I've had the blessing of living in a number of parts of the world, everyone has that innate need to be able to take care of themselves and their family and their community, self-reliance. It is the human dignity that is part and parcel of who we are. And we really want to help communities and countries on their journey. I can't walk ahead of them. We can walk at their side. We can't want them more than they do. But where we see people who want to go on that journey, my view is we need to help them. And that, again, is part of who we are as Americans, and it is, I think, a way that we make the world a better place. And so what we're going to do at USAID with our programs is try to measure each program and measure each dollar by how it helps countries, communities move a little bit closer to that day of self-reliance. And it doesn't so much change the work that we're doing as how we posture ourselves towards it and how we measure what we do. We'll also look to incentivize reform. When I was ambassador in East Africa, my message was consistent. I'd say, look, I'm not saying we got all the answers. I'm saying that maybe we've made all the mistakes and that you don't have to make the same mistakes that we do. We will share with you our experience. And so I think you take that approach and you incentivize the reforms that pretty much all of us here agree are necessary for a country to rise and for a country to get to self-reliance. But the whole other area is in humanitarian assistance. We are the largest bilateral donor of humanitarian assistance in the world, and no one else is even close. 29% of all of the humanitarian assistance in the world comes through us. We are greater than numbers 2 and 3 combined. That's who we are. We will never back down from that. It is a major part of our identity in the world. So we will always look for ways to help people when crisis strikes, but to be truly compassionate, and this is again part of what I saw in Ethiopia, we'll also look for ways to help strengthen resilience. Again, this idea of helping people to be more self-reliant in the face of future shocks. And I think that's how we're truly compassionate in what we do. And so as we look to shape how we work and what we look like, we're going to try to elevate our humanitarian assistance work and make sure that it is as nimble and as sharp as it ever has been. And we'll look for ways to strengthen that portion that we call resilience work. We'll also look to orient our missions towards this idea of journeys of self-reliance. And that's what I'll be asking of our mission directors, is not just telling me about need in the sense of inputs, but tell me about need in terms of capacity. And what are those things that we can do, especially where we have reformers as partners. I'll be real honest, and we all know these countries and governments. You'll go to some leaders and you'll talk about those things that we all agree they should do, and you look and, they're not really going to do it. I'm not as sympathetic. But where we have those people who are willing to do the tough stuff, I think we should stand with them. And I think we should walk with them along the way. We'll also be looking to make sure that our relationship with each country is appropriate to their capacity, to resources, but also to what the strategic relationship should look like. So in some places, in some cases, it may be that the traditional development assistance model isn't the best relationship. It may not be what our host country wants. It may be that we transition to more of an enterprise-driven model. But what's really important to me is that we recognize the value of the investments that we make along the way, and we make sure we hold on to them. As was mentioned, I've served on the MCC board. This is now my third term by virtue of being USAID administrator. I'm the only person to have 3 terms on the board, so I've been watching it for a while. And one of the neatest things about the MCC model is I've attended compact closings. And remember that when a compact closes statutorily, the money stops. That day, no more money. It's over, it's done, not $1 more comes. In not one of those countries was there a bad news story. In not one of them was the story, America's leaving. In each case, it was celebrating an accomplishment. I look at, one of the great advantages or virtues of the MCC model is it gets to be selective. At USAID, we actually don't get to be terribly selective. We work in really, really hard places. And so when countries progress to the point where we can talk about a transition, that should be a major reason for celebration. And I want to make sure that we captured that better than we are. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to take a look at. And the final point, as part of this idea of what a relationship, a strategic relationship, a strategic transition should look like, we're also going to do, I think, a better job in private sector engagement. And what I mean by that is we're looking to use the tools that we already have, but use them earlier in a process, in a conversation with the private sector. So we want to move beyond mere contracting and grant making. We will still do contracting and grant making, but we want to look at true collaboration. We want to look at co-design. We want to look at co-financing. So what you will see from us a little more often is building on the development lab principles, building on the grand challenges that have been issued and answered in recent years, and use that model more often. So we point to a challenge, we point to a topic or an issue area, and we reach out to the community and say, what do you think? What are your ideas? What different ideas do you have, initiatives, tools, that we can use to better achieve the objectives of our development programs? And so what we'll try to do is involve the private sector, from academic institutions to private NGOs to, yes, God forbid, even private businesses, and see if we can't work with them to design programs that are as creative and as innovative as we can possibly do. It'll make our dollars go further, and I think it also is more likely to achieve the results that we all want to see. And I'll be ready to turn it over to George in questions, but again, I'm 3 months and a little bit in this process, and I never cease to be amazed at how important our work is in everywhere where we are. It's important, obviously, for the immediate development outcomes, but it is also very important because done right, and that sometimes I don't think we tell our story as well as we need to do, but it is the face of the compassionate American taxpayer. And that's great. That's as good as it gets. So again, thanks to all of you for your continued work and your continued support. We have a lot of work to do, but it's good work, and it's work that's worth doing. So thank you.
Mark, thank you for those comments. Particularly, I'll make one comment, and that is towards the end, what I heard was a similar transition process that occurred in the past two administrations, which was the new administration continuing some of the initiatives of the prior administration and building on them. And that's obviously for the importance of the bipartisanship that has characterized this arena in the last couple of decades almost. That's very important. We have very limited time. I've received enough questions to keep us here 2 or 3 hours. So my role is to try to filter them down into a couple of common themes. And one of them is redesign. And a couple of the questions wanted to know your thoughts on the new aid redesign consensus, which I'd love to ask you, but I know that that all exists in a black box. And what I think you can comment on is the separate internal redesign process that you've started. And just to tee you up a little bit, one of the questions was, what are you going to do about the contracting process? How are you going to deal?
Does anybody care here?
Yeah, that's right. How are you going to deal with your thoughts on transition? What are you going to do? You've talked about accountability and transparency. So give us a sense of what this internal redesign is, why you're doing it, and what you hope to accomplish it, a couple of areas you're working in.
Great, thank you. So I see my friend Jim Richardson here as our senior advisor for redesign. I just outed him, so he may want to get out the back door before anybody tackles him on the way. No, so as George is pointing to, something that I don't think a lot of people perhaps were aware of, as the redesign process occurred, we were asked to submit our own redesign. So there's an internal redesign as well as a joint project that we undertook with state. Our internal redesign, and they've both been submitted to OMB, really comes out of the themes that I laid out when I went through confirmation, most of which you've just heard from me. This idea of forward-looking development journeys, strategic transitions, capacity building, elevation of humanitarian assistance, and that's basically what's at the heart of what we submitted. And we're in that discussion period with OMB. It's 180 days. September 12th, I think, is when we formally submitted. And we've gotten some feedback, and it's good feedback and positive feedback. And so there are things that we are undertaking now which will be very transparent and won't be any surprises. And it is really along the themes that you've just heard. And so we're spending time talking with our friends, my brothers and sisters on Capitol Hill, and trying to lay the groundwork for some of the things that we want to do. The process that we will undertake will be employee-led, and it'll be career employee-led. A, to make sure it's sustainable. B, to get the best ideas that we can possibly find as we look to tailor this. But that's the process that we're undertaking. Part of that you pointed to really goes to the heart of what we want to do, how we look at transitions. So one of the most important projects that we will undertake is trying to identify what the signposts are as a country moves towards self-reliance. Trying to help us understand where a country's capacity is in each of the sectors where we're working, the sectors that are important to us. And so that is underway. We have both our teams working on it internally, along with ACVA is helping to provide some outside, through working groups, outside input, and that process is continuing. And it's crucial because it helps us to make logical, metrics-based investments. What's very important to me is to do things in ways that people can have faith in, to try to, not that we'll always get it right, and not that politics won't enter in. Again, my brothers and sisters on Capitol Hill, we know that happens, but what we want to do is be very open and transparent about what these journeys look like, where we see countries being, and areas that we can, and we being all of us, not just USAID, but the private sector, the other agencies in the interagency, other donor partners can be involved to help address. So they're very important projects. They will take time to get them right. It differs from MCC in that I'm hoping these will be capacity oriented. Again, MCC measures well a whole wide range of things, on country process, but it also measures such things as how much of a budget is going towards a particular sector. And those are all important, but I'm particularly interested in capacity because it helps us understand where money should go, not just geographically, but when we have a limited pot of money, and I promise you it is a limited pot of money. Oftentimes countries will come to me, and as they did even today, and they will come to me and say, we'd like you to put money here. Well, yeah, but actually that's not really what you need. That means, and I'm a democracy guy, democracy, sustainability that I think comes from democratic governance. I think that's part of what we look at. And so that project is underway right now. As I said, it's a long methodical process because we want to make sure that we get it right.
You know, knowing your background, Mark, you're not only a democracy guy, you're an education guy, because I remember those days. You're a health guy, and now you've become a humanitarian guy. Do you have you have a notional schedule for this redesign? Will it come out when the budget and the big redesign, will it come out piece by piece?
You know, one of the, there are many things that I've learned in 90 days. One of those that I've learned is...
It's not to set a schedule?
Well, A is not to set a schedule. B is also to do this right and to do it in a sustainable way and to actually follow this through because we're serious requires long consultations with stakeholders as well as funders and the interagency, and so it is a long process. So hopefully you'll begin to see signs of it sooner than later, but you know, getting this right on strategic transitions, for example, that's a long process. And to give you an idea of how methodical all this is, I am having discussions, and I did all this week on, believe it or not, the 2020 budget.
2020 budget.
So, you know, this is, it's a long process to do right.
It won't surprise you that a number of the questions that came in were on personnel. You've spoken to the fact that the people are the most important asset of the agency. We all are well aware of the dysfunction or antiquated HR system AID has. I don't know if you can give us any further clarity on those 97 positions where the new hires aren't going to be brought in, but would love to hear something about that if you can clarify. And your broader thoughts on how you advance and improve the personnel system, and is that part of your internal redesign process?
Great, thanks for the question. On the story that came out, the statement that came out from our team, from the HR team, is a little bit imprecise in that it wasn't that positions were eliminated. No positions have been eliminated. It's that we're subject to a hiring freeze still. And that's really the situation. So Secretary Tillerson has indicated that at least through the fiscal year 18, the hiring freeze will continue. We're subject to that hiring freeze. And that's really what the story was about. It wasn't, we haven't eliminated positions, but we are laboring under a hiring freeze. The Secretary has been granting exceptions, some exceptions and exemptions. So one of the things that we have done, we began doing actually some weeks back to be responsible as we possibly can, is we created a hiring reassignment and review board, which allows us to respond to internal needs, prioritize them strategically. Obviously, security requirements are important. Also, our commitment to diversity and civil rights, important, making sure that we prioritize these, and we're taking requests for exceptions to the Secretary, trying to manage this in the most logical way that we can. So that's really what happened there. But let me address the longer term question that I think your questions beg, and that is, how do we make sure that we continue to have what is the lifeblood of USAID, which are people? I mean, it's not where the agency is located. It could be located anywhere, right? It is who we have, who comes in the doors, who's working out in the field, our direct hires, all of our employee classifications, in particular our overseas foreign service nationals, who are the largest part, obviously, of our workforce. And I want to undertake efforts to improve how we recruit and we retain the best that we can possibly find. We recognize that skill needs are changing because the world is changing. So, we need to make sure that we continue to get bright, talented, young people who reflect the face of America and make USAID the best possible place to work. So we recruit the best we can find, we hold on to the best that we can find, we promote the best that we can find, that we are honest in our assessments and in evaluations. And you said it in your question, we're not doing that as well as we need to do it for the long haul. We need to get better at that, and in fact, I think we need to do it better across the government. But I really want to make sure that we do this the right way. We still need the basic qualities and values and characteristics of USAID staff haven't changed. We need people who are nimble, smart, courageous, flexible. As we all know, we live in challenging environments that change rapidly. All of those things will continue, but the skill sets will change as time goes on. So another part of it is what we do for providing people on an ongoing basis those skills that they need to improve and to rise. And that's something that we'll need to take on. We need to get better at.
Well, Mark, being at Brookings, I'm not used to a time schedule or to being told what to do. But
Well, welcome to my world.
But your assistant has just told me a minute ago that we have 3 minutes left. So give us a little more on your vision of how you engage the private sector more.
Sure.
And I'll abuse my position here, and that is that in the redesign process and in the notion that maybe you expand OPIC into Development Finance Corporation, we've all been frustrated over the years over the inadequate relationship between OPIC and AID. How do you improve that relationship? How do you bridge that gap, that void between the grant assistance and the market assistance? And what about a joint OPIC-AID office? You can answer. You can think about that one later.
So, first off, I'll respond to your comment about time. My very favorite Ronald Reagan story was after Reagan had been president for about 6 months, one of his buddies from California came into the Oval Office and shut the door and sat down in front of him and said, "Well, Ron, what's it like to be the most powerful man in the world?" And Reagan looked at him and said, "No. Actually, when I come in the morning, there's a piece of paper that says where I got to be every 15 minutes. Whoever did that, that's the most powerful person in the world." So on the private sector engagement, so take a look, and also a piece of this. You had pointed out rightly, and it is an important principle to reaffirm and restate. This is a safe zone politically. Our work in development and humanitarian assistance are tools. Every administration in modern times has contributed tools. It has made us better and more capable as we go along. Some of the tools added by the last administration, particularly Feed the Future, it's great. It's a good tool. I like the programs. I think they work. Feed the Future, I think, among its contributions, beyond the obvious on food security, is better tapping into the capacity we have in the private sector. From America's universities and research institutions to some of our for-profit businesses in the agribusiness sector. And we really want to take that along with the principles of the Global Development Lab and sort of mainstream them across the organization. So in simple terms, think about some of the grand challenges that were issued by USAID over the last 8-10 years. For example, the grand challenge around Ebola, which led to a whole wide range of innovations, including protective gear. Johns Hopkins helped pioneer that we didn't have before. You know, I want to take that and apply that to more of our challenges. So I want to turn to the private sector earlier in the process and say, look, this is a sector we're working on. This is a region where we're working on it. We know what we've been doing, and maybe that's what we need to keep doing. But what do you think? What do you see? What are your ideas? What are the technologies? Because there are a number of things that we do domestically that we simply haven't applied overseas yet, not because they're bad ideas, but because we sometimes are so, I won't say caught up because that implies negative, but we keep doing traditional work, important work. We don't sort of stand back and say, wow, look at this. An example is the CoolBot technology, where a guy, I think it was New York, figured out how to take basically a window unit air conditioner and turn it into a portable refrigeration unit for domestic farm purposes. And then USAID heard about it, looked at it, said, God, that's really a cool idea. We could use this in a whole slew of places around the world. And what USAID did was not to buy 500 of them and hand them out around the world, which is the traditional model. It's instead to take the maker and connect them with the market and maybe help subsidize the market to start it, but then stand back. And so that's an example where USAID's investments are modest. Our assistance in intellectual resources, I would argue, are great and important, but the cost, if you will, to us programmatically was modest. And yet it made a huge difference. I think by the end of this year, a few thousand, I believe, is what the target is for getting out into the field. So that's the kind of model of what we want to do. At the World Food Prize in Des Moines recently, I issued a challenge to the private sector and to our universities to come together around the rapidly approaching problem of the fall armyworm in Africa, which is already devastating in a number of places, yet is pestilence that we conquered in the U.S. a long time ago. And so why don't we try to match some of the technologies adapted that we have here to the needs in Africa? And so it's looking at ways of looking for market openings for some of the hybrid seeds, for some of the technologies that we do. So, again, we will continue to contract, we will continue to do grant making, but I think we can go so much further if we turn and use some of these innovative ideas. Furthermore, to your point, I want to get us away from turf battles, because nobody has time for them. I don't have time for them. And secondly, remember who we is. It's the United States taxpayer. I mean, that's the we. This is the generous contributions of the American taxpayer. They don't really care which agency it goes through. They don't know which agency it goes through. They just want to make sure that the money is going to the right place, do the right things in the most effective, efficient way we can. So that means that we need to, across the USG, across the interagency, be talking all the time. I sit on the board of OPIC. I have a seat at OPIC. I like Ray Washburn a lot. I think he brings a lot to the table. And we've had some of these conversations about potentially doing trips together. and taking a look at what the various capacities are and how we might apply them to the challenges that we see. So, we've pledged at USAID to be good neighbors and good partners inside the U.S. government, because Lord knows there's more than enough work to do, and we'll never have enough resources to do everything we want to do. So if we can take a look at some of the innovative financing mechanisms that OPIC, the World Bank, some of our partners overseas bring, so much the better. There's a lot of talk about a new development finance institution of some kind. I think that's a good thing. I would argue, and not just for the selfish purposes of USAID, that we have to be at the heart of that, because we're the ones with the field presence that help identify needs. We're the interlocutor with our partners, and it's crucial. And again, we're arguing that we want to set this mission of self-reliance, so we need to be the ones that help make sure everything's focused and can measure the results, the outcomes. But if we're in a country where another agency or the private sector or a financing institution of the U.S. government has greater capacity, great. That's good for us. That just helps us get to our goal faster.
Good. Thank you, Mark. As you know, you're speaking to a group of people who have a lot of passion and have brought a lot of smarts to the issue of development and how to make aid effective and build capacity in countries. And I think they take a lot of solace that we have an administrator of USAID who represents those characteristics of a passion for the mission of AID and bringing a lot of good thought to what we should do. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, George. Again, thanks to all of you for everything that you've done. More importantly, thanks for all that you're going to do. We appreciate it very much.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more outstanding panel yet to go. So if you don't mind having your seats, and let us start our final panel, which is a star-studded panel reviewing the reform issues. Where is aid heading? And the moderator of this panel is CGD's own Scott Morris. So Scott, if you would come up, please, and introduce your panel members. We would like to go the full time. Anybody who has to leave is allowed to leave, but I think that we hope we can get the full time that was originally scheduled. Okay? Welcome, everybody.
Stock still for the next one.
Try not to move around too much.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. I knew we ran the risk of being upstaged by the last discussion, and I was struck that the very thoughtful answers to really some key questions. So it's my task not to duplicate that discussion. I'm going to try to pose related but different set of questions to this excellent panel. I will introduce them very briefly, particularly for the sake of time. It did strike me that all 5 of us have been Capitol Hill staffers, and all but one of us have worked in the executive branch. So Ryan, the pressure is on you now to take that next job.
We do have a lot of jobs
in the executive. But very, very briefly, let me just go down the row so that you're all aware, if you aren't already, who these panelists are. Jim Richardson, who you already heard from Ambassador Green, is currently serving as senior advisor at USAID, and importantly for our purposes, has been spearheading the redesign efforts. Ryan Evans is longtime staffer for Senator Johnny Isakson, legislative assistant currently. As you no doubt know, Senator Isakson plays a key role on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee when it comes to oversight of USAID as chair of that subcommittee. DOhlbaum is currently senior associate at one of our rivals, CGD, Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, and herself a longtime Hill staffer on foreign assistance issues, and really was in the trenches on earlier major reform efforts on foreign assistance. And last but not least, LMunson, again, a longtime Hill staffer, executive branch experience, and is very active in your current capacity in the private sector on the aid reform discussions. So it's a great panel, very much looking forward to it. What I want to do is start with our official representatives, and particularly you, Jim. We got a very good answer to the broad question from the administrator about redesign, but maybe we can do another round from your perspective in the eye of the storm, and particularly if you might want to characterize, recognizing that reform is not a new idea. Every administration takes a stab at it. What's unique about this moment and the process that you've been engaged in? How would you characterize that, and based on that, characterize perhaps prospects going forward?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I would say I would start at the beginning when we really took off on redesign. Initially, we were lockstep with the State Department. And really sort of identified pain points and desires of the employees about what do they want to see different at state and aid. And the answers back from our aid colleagues was very striking, but it's not surprising. 89% of our people are inspired by the work they do every day. And it's amazing and shocking, and any business would love to have that type of excitement about what they do and the excitement about development. And so what really spoke to us is that, you know what, there's a passion for development, there's a passion for doing our jobs better, to having greater impact, to be focused on outcomes, and to build greater capacity inside the institution to be more relevant in this new age. And so that, from our perspective, was really the genesis of administrators launching the internal aid redesign, is to really take those notions and start executing off of that. How do we make aid and development more powerful and relevant in the age we find ourselves today? And so I think as we're thinking about how this is different, we have to first think about how similar it is to things that we've tried in the past and I've continued to work on. So I will say that, as the administrator mentioned, a lot of the ideas that we've started working on are actually not new. There are ideas that started in previous administrations, and we want to continue that journey. We want to put a finer point on that. Maybe we'll take a slightly different tack. We'll learn from the mistakes of the past, and hopefully we'll probably make new ones, but that's okay. But we really want to drive to understand that the ideas that we're putting forward aren't necessarily new, and they're not new for the fact that a lot of think tanks have talked about the same things that we're wanting to do. Our employees are wanting to do the same things. So there's general consensus, I think, inside the community, and with our partners, with our employees, with think tanks, and also we've had a lot of good feedback from the Hill as well about what we're looking to do. So I think we are in a unique moment that we have an opportunity to really make development more relevant and aid a stronger institution.
Great. So Ryan, you are yourself a key Hill actor on this, your boss certainly as well. Both your reaction to that, but also, I mean, define your priorities for this process.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think from a congressional perspective, we hear from our constituents all the time about all sorts of subjects, but we often hear, too often, I think, a misconception about what our overseas activities are and how much of the budget it actually constitutes. And so I think for us, when we're working on what we know is less than 1% of the overall budget, we want to make sure that we can communicate as effectively as possible all the good work that we're actually doing out in the world. And so, you know, it really comes down to making sure that what we are spending is effective, that we're not duplicative, and you know, that we're coordinated in those efforts. And I think, at least from my boss's perspective, that's where we want to see USAID go. We want it to be a very coordinated, harmonized, all those buzzwords that you've heard before. We want to see that through and make sure that you know, we can continue to lead on efforts where we've done amazing work in global health, in food security. You know, you can name any of those priorities, and I think you could show where we've done good things. So we just want to continue that on, and I think the Hill has sent some very positive messages out about how we are engaging and what we want to see through, and that reform, we shouldn't be afraid of that conversation either. That's important too, that not to come at it as a negative, to really, you know, take it on and not be afraid of that conversation.
So, and Diana, I mean, particularly drawing on your past experience with these efforts from the Hill side, I think we always hear about, you know, strong engagement with the Hill, a good working relationship at a high level, but, you know, it does get down to the brass tacks of, frankly, what does an administration need legislatively? Yeah. What don't they need? And so are there any elements of this as it's unfolded where you would make those clear distinctions of where Congress will want to act, where it has to act, et cetera?
Sure. But first, I would just like to note, in a little response to what Jim was bringing up about how unique this moment is. Because we've all been through many rounds of attempts at foreign assistance reform and USAID reform. And what's happened in the past is it's either been the Congress wanted it and the administration didn't. The administration wanted it and Congress didn't. Democrats or Republicans. It was always, you know, there were opponents, and this is the first time that the administration, Congress, Democrats, Republicans, and the broader community are all sort of united in the idea that things need to be changed. And I think that there's some degree of consensus on the general direction things need to go. So that's helpful. What Congress has is not really able to do through legislation is to change the processes. These are things that the administration needs to do internally, and there's some congressional involvement in that, you know, with notifications and so forth, but Congress has it has focused a lot of its efforts on the structural reform. And the problem is when it tries to change the structures, I mean, we can create them, but the administration doesn't have to come. And many of you probably remember this thing called IDCA, the International Development Cooperation Agency, which was supposed to oversee USAID and all the agencies. It was there on paper, but it didn't exist in reality. So I think that just underlines that Congress does have some powers, the administration has some powers, but unless they work together and have really good coordination, cooperation, consultation, you're going to end up with something that doesn't look like what you intended.
So Les, I'm going to ask you perhaps to introduce more of, I don't want to say a negative note, but this is all, you know, the stars are aligned. This all sounds great. But I wonder, I mean, if we pull the lens back a little bit, and I think, you know, you certainly have your pulse on a wide array of actors on the Hill side in the executive branch. Where are the risks and obstacles, and, you know, still big picture for this exercise?
Sure. First of all, it's great to be at the USAID Alumni Association. I see a lot of familiar faces from when I was at AID. You guys all look fantastic. Congratulations. Great to see you. I guess if I were to be a critic or to be to kind of throw a rock into the consensus pool, which I think is there is consensus, and it's terrific, and it's a wonderful opportunity. I think it's that we should push the Hill and the administration to seize the moment, maybe even more than they have. I think we missed an opportunity 8 years ago when the last administration was coming in. We didn't have an administrator for a year. There was not a lot of energy on the issues coming out of the transition back in 2008, 2009. And there was a missed opportunity. I think the Obama administration made up for that later on and had some very good initiatives that they worked with the Hill on that turned out pretty good. But the initial energy wasn't there. Now we have some initial energy, even though I would argue the Trump administration probably got off to a little bit of a slow start, and there's still, as Jim noted, there's still plenty of positions open. But we've got an administrator in place. We got a terrific administrator. We've got willingness to have reform. You've got a Hill, one controlled by Republicans who are eager for reform and to recast foreign assistance for the 21st century, and to kind of seize the moment. So I think, I guess if I were to be a critic, I would say, let's push our first and second branches of government to do even more than they're doing right now. And rather than, and I would worry that we're a little too focused on just this process or that internal process. Those are important things and should be addressed, but let's go bigger, let's seize the moment. I think China was kind of eating our lunch 2-3 years ago when they started the new development bank in Asia. We need to fight back against that. It's in the U.S. national interest to do so. We have an opportunity here to really to seize the day, and I wouldn't get too distracted by what the initial OMB request was back at the beginning of the year. I think that was a press release and nothing more, and that's certainly how the Hill treated it. We shouldn't get too bogged down in that. We managed to elegantly avoid the debate over whether to put aid into state. So the road is kind of clear here of any major collisions. We should go speeding down the highway towards the future.
Yeah.
Great. So this issue of transition, Administrator Green talked about it just a few minutes ago. He talks about it consistently a lot. The principles seem clear enough, and frankly, the case is a good one. I guess I'd like to hear perhaps from any of you who want to comment what it means in concrete terms to you. And let me just add, it's, Les, you invoke China, and it is striking that, the visibility of China's engagement in a very wide array of countries creates a challenge for the United States to think about, when we say transition, do we mean disengagement? And if not, what do we mean? So I wonder if anyone wants to throw out their ideas, and then maybe Jim, you can give us a sense of where you think you're actually going on transition. But do any of you want to come in first?
Well, I think there's been some reporting already that the administration and the Hill are looking at an enhanced development finance authority of some kind. OPIC appears to be the pivot point on that. I think that's a terrific idea, and I hope they're thinking big and not going home. And that's because that's going to be a great tool in the toolbox as we confront China in any number of places, as you mentioned, going forward. So I think that's a great opportunity, and I hope we seize the moment.
I guess kind of, if I may, to your point about does transition mean disengagement or something else? I think I wouldn't think it would mean disengagement at all. I mean, I think if you look over the history of our assistance and what we've done, I can't remember the exact number, but it's a dozen countries that used to receive foreign assistance are now free trade partners. I think that's how we have to think about this. And I know my boss and in our office, we talk a lot about how do we have private sector engage with the U.S. government in our development efforts to try to have real economic growth and development to have this be sustainable across, a very long period of time. And so it's a transition into a new and different type of relationship, a more, reciprocal trading relationships. How do we get U.S. standards and private sector and these and different contexts? I mean, I think that's what we try to think of when we're talking about transition or graduation or whatever we want to call it. It's just changing the dynamic a little bit, not necessarily disengaging.
Mm-hmm.
I worry that we are actually conflating three different issues when we talk about transition. The first is the one that I think poses the biggest concern for a lot of us, especially in the NGO community, which is that this is a budget-driven thing and we're looking for ways to cut money and get out of places. And maybe not at USAID, but maybe at OMB or someplace, there may be some degree of truth to that. The second part of it is something that actually the Obama administration talked about a lot and didn't get as far as many of us would have liked to, which was on this focus and selectivity in picking the places where there's the most need and where we can make the most difference, because just like sprinkling a little bit amount of money around everywhere doesn't necessarily get you the best results. And to the extent that we're talking about being strategic about where we spend our money, that's another part of the conversation. But the third one is that when we are in a place that our aid is, as the administrator says, designed to create a situation where it's no longer needed, and how do we develop a whole spectrum of a relationship that's not just aid, but based in all these different areas, and that's a conversation also that everyone wants to have. So if we can deal with the first issue, I think we'll have a more productive conversation about the other two.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, just to the first issue, it constantly gets brought up, and so I do want to sort of address it, because the concept of strategic transitions, from our perspective, it's actually to keep us from making these decisions because of budgetary reasons, right? We want to be honest with the Congress and the interagency, the host country, our NGO partners, about the actual needs of our host countries, what types of programming that we believe that we need to do in order to build the capacity, in order to get to that next level of relationship. And so that we want to strategically transition because I always say we're good at our jobs, not me, I'm not, but the USAID, that they're good at their jobs, they're accomplished professionals, and they know how to do this well, and so we're trying to give them the tools in order to help them get countries to that place so that then we can transition these countries and then we can reinvest the resources into more needier places. And for us, strategically, we believe a core tenet we have is that there's always going to be more need than resources, period. And it doesn't, if Congress gives us twice as much resources, they'll still be true. And so how do we make sure that we are thinking about every dollar in a strategic way in order to advance U.S. interests and to advance capacity in a country? And that's really the driver for us. The other thing I would say, is when we talk about sort of what the relationship is, Ryan is absolutely right about the way that we're thinking about this. This is not about turning off the lights. It's not about graduation. It's about transitioning the relationship between that country and the American people. And so, we fully understand that there could be need for continuing programming at a specific place that would continue, and that's not a problem. We're happy to do that. But we really want to shift the conversation away from large-scale development programs to a more trade-based, bilateral relationship, private sector engagement type of model that leverages the investment that was made during the development portion, and then build on that so that we have eventually these countries can become donors and partners with us. That's the objective, as I think Ryan pointed out. We have a bunch of countries who've transitioned to the point where now they have their own aids, or they have free trade agreements, and that's ultimately what, as development professionals, we're hoping to see around the world.
That's great. I liked all those answers, and again, coming back to China, particularly because I'm increasingly focused on China's activities, it is striking, at the very time where for various good reasons and pressures, we as the U.S. are trying to move along a trajectory away from aid where it's appropriate. The Chinese, in some ways, are moving in the other direction, where their starting point is to some degree where we're aiming for, and they are now introducing more aid elements to what they do. But I think the key is, as you noted, Les, with what seems to be momentum around more capabilities in particularly private sector engagement. The key is that is made real, so that you're not left with state visits, press releases with no real activity behind it. And I think that's going to be a tricky thing, frankly, to pull off. But things like a more robust OPIC, I think, would play a key role going forward. So let me shift. Again, in the last discussion, we heard a little bit about HR reform, but let me take a slightly different tack on that question. And if we think maybe more big picture, an evolving global landscape, an evolution of our own aid toolkit, what does the aid worker of the future look like, whether for USAID or for the U.S. government more broadly? Is it a different skill set than we see in the workforce today? And if so, what does it look like?
I guess I'll start. Development professional is the term that we like to use. But really, in that's really encapsulates it. I'm amazed. I just got off the plane last night from a trip to Albania and to Germany. So if I'm a little jet lagged, I apologize. If I don't make sense, that's the reason. It's not because I don't make sense. But when I'm always amazed by the people that are attracted to work for aid are often a little bit older. They've been in the community a little bit longer. They've been in the Peace Corps. They've been with implementing partners. They have advanced degrees or several advanced degrees. They want to be at aid because of the mission and because of the work. And so we attract really wonderfully talented people. And we want to continue to have aid as an attractive place to work. The challenge that we have is really workforce planning. And as we are thinking about what is the aid worker, not today that we need, or the development professional we need today, but what is it that we need 20 years from now, and how do we recruit that? And so that's the conversation that we're starting to have more of really focusing our human capital apparatus on workforce planning and making sure that we're recruiting the types of people that are flexible, that do have the skill sets that are not necessarily needed for today, but really in the future. So I'll let them answer as to what that looks like.
You know, I never shied away from criticizing the results of the RIF back in the 90s and how it hollowed out the whole agency, and especially what we lost were the technical professionals, whether, you know, it's engineers and agronomists and this kind of thing, and how important that was and how much their loss meant to the agency. And that it was a loss in the 90s and the 2000s. But as we look to the future, you know, there are different skill sets we have to be thinking about, and I think it's due to a more nuanced understanding of country ownership, so that we're not doing for people anymore. We're helping them do for themselves more. And so skills that are more like facilitation, convening, and helping. I'll call it knowledge management, even though I hate that term, but the idea of knowing where to find the information that's needed and how to analyze it. A lot of that involves data and statistics and so forth, that the information's out there, but people don't always have the access to it or the knowledge of how to bring evidence into decision making. So these are skills that I'm sure many development professionals already have, but I think they're going to be more needed in the future.
I'll cause some grumbling. I think USAID, as it's thinking about its workforce of the future, should be thinking about people coming out of the military more than they do now. Not for every position, obviously, but right now, aid is has one of the lowest veterans hiring percentages of any U.S. government agency. I think it's the second lowest. That's a shame, and I think there's a huge opportunity to tap some of the talent that's coming out of the 050 account, if you will, to come in and be action officers for USAID and other development agencies in the field, frankly. And I think that's one of the salutary impacts of that will be, again, this will cause some grumbling, a better working relationship between USAID and other development agencies and the Department of Defense, which is going to be critical to success in the field across a lot of the spectrum of development activities.
I don't think you want Congress to get too prescriptive who to hire and when to and what.
Fair enough.
Can I just piggyback on what Les said? I'll probably create grumblings too, but I'm used to that. I spent, like Ryan, I spent a long time on Capitol Hill, so angry town halls where people throw stuff at you, that's normal. So this is a little grumbling is just healthy. I would just say over the last 10, 15 years, nearly all of our Foreign Service officers have served with the military overseas in non-permissive environments. It has been a radical sea change in terms of not necessarily us understanding DoD, although I think that's been really healthy, but DoD understanding the power of development. And the more that we can foster mutual respect and understanding between the two institutions in order to advance a common agenda and a common vision, I think is good. And I think we're looking for greater opportunities. Right now, we do have development advisors in all of our COCOMs. It's great. But is that really enough to foster the level of respect and understanding of the power of development, while also understanding for ourselves how the military thinks, how it operates, and how we can intersect with that on a healthier level? So there you go.
Great. So I am going to turn to you all in just a minute and allow time for your questions. I saved what I think is probably my toughest question for last, which is this. So, reading this room and listening to the last discussion, and certainly the temperature around town in general, I think what I've observed is remarkable goodwill for what USAID is up to right now, and particularly confidence in its leadership. And that is certainly critical to making progress on any kind of ambition in terms of reform initiatives, what have you. I don't think it's provocative to say that that stands in contrast with other parts of the government right now, that if we look at the State Department, just more generally, there's a lot of conflict, a lot of controversy. So I guess the question is, how does USAID navigate those waters, the politics of it, the actual engagement in the interagency process, and maybe in a more, further removed from politics, where, if we're talking about reform to development policy broadly, where can't USAID do it alone? Where does it actually need state to be doing something different? Different kind of engagement with OPIC. How does USAID fit into this broader landscape that frankly feels more troubled than things within the aid agency itself? Maybe Jim doesn't have to go first.
I mean, I'll answer some of that and then artfully dodge the rest. I think as we're really thinking about the interagency and we're thinking about sort of our role in that, I think from the administrator's perspective, we really need to be forthright, to be honest, to be transparent, to be aggressive. We have I don't want to say a product, we have a wonderful product to sell. The aid is a wonderful institution filled with really tremendous people, and development has, I always tell the story that when the administrator first met with the president, he told the president, all the things the challenges, international challenges that you're describing on a regular basis, development has the power to make a change and make a positive influence on each one of those. And he got the job, so maybe it worked. So, we really need to be unashamed of the power of development and about what it can actually accomplish. And that's what we're doing. I'll leave the rest of the conversation to these experts.
I have this terrible feeling of vulnerability here because this is an extraordinary moment. For most of the years that I've been in Washington, USAID has been sort of the whipping boy of the foreign policy establishment, and everyone hated USAID, and Democrats and Republicans alike were trying to get rid of it. So seeing that there is this broad support feels wonderful, but also scary because you know how quickly things can shift. And being the only Democrat on this panel, I am okay in saying that. I worry that the broader policy environment, the broader budget and tax environment leaves us in a very difficult position because there's all this goodwill in the authorizing and appropriating committees in Congress at USAID. I'm not convinced that that is reciprocated outside those places and in other parts of the U.S. government. And so I think we have to be very vigilant that we don't do something that tips the balance in a bad way.
I'll jump out on this a little bit and say I think there is a burden for the administrator and his team to demonstrate the effectiveness of the initiative they're talking about on transitions and graduation and that kind of thing, and to demonstrate it to the top levels of the executive branch and in Congress, to folks who are maybe looking at bottom lines with a raised eyebrow. They have to demonstrate great effectiveness and a coherent plan, and they have to roll that out well. I have full confidence they're going to do that, and that is going to be a process that goes well, and that once that happens, it frees up, I think, some space for our friends who are really running the policy day to day to really get some other terrific things done. I also hope that as that process is going on for the next iteration of this, that we think more broadly than just USAID and state and start thinking about the assistance programs that are in other agencies and other departments and bringing them into a sensible place, which I think is USAID, where there can be some real accountability for them. I hope that's something that could be like a second round of reform in this administration.
Well, I guess I'll jump in too. You know, I would have to say in the administrator's confirmation hearing, my boss and he served together in the House of Representatives, and they've been friends for quite some time. And Senator Isaacson, I don't even think he asked a question. He just expressed his full confidence in the administrator going forward. So, you know, I think I agree that there's a great deal of goodwill, and I think to avoid that kind of tipping point that you pointed out, I think that's a very astute point and is true. And it takes a lot of transparency with Capitol Hill. We're naturally skeptical of the executive branch. It's just the way they train us in the offices, and you know, and it's the same at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. So you know, they're skeptical of us. So you know, I think that back and forth is really important. You know, I know we'll be looking for technical assistance on ideas that senators and House members have. You know, there's a lot of good ideas that are floating out there, and you know, I think we're just ready and eager to work on them. You know, and I think that there is a lot of goodwill, but you really don't want to waste it either.
Excellent. Okay, so over to you all. We have 2 microphones that will come to you. Please wait for them. Why don't we go here and here? And I think we'll collect 3 at a time. So please.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Gretchen Bloom, and I'm thrilled to finally hear something that's a little disastrous or dysfunctional or something. What do we see every day on CNN? Yesterday, I was at the Women's National Democratic Club, where I'm a staunch member, and we heard Hillary Clinton. She was up there. She wasn't exactly sounding like you've all sounded today. So if she had been president, I think we would be hearing the same thing. Is that right? So I'm glad finally that somebody has said something, that reproductive health funding has been taken away, not just for organizations that we're involved with, but if any other country funds an organization that we've been involved with and they're doing reproductive health, they can't do that anymore. Climate change, we can't have a scientist who's getting EPA funding do anything. On a panel in Rhode Island recently, 3 scientists were turned down. So I'm not hearing that today at all. I guess I'm pleased, but I'm a little unbelieving. So thank you. Somebody else is reporting behind me. Thank you, somebody, for saying, oh, things aren't quite as much as we thought they might be, because it's a different year. I would have thought it would be a negative year and not a positive. 30% cutting of funding of development assistance and diplomacy? No one said anything like that today. So anyway, thank you very much for somebody saying something.
Okay. Comment, not a question. That's fine.
Just
Question here.
Frank Miller, just a comment. You mentioned something about dealing with or cooperating more with the military. I'm concerned about AID's role in the interagency. Our cooperation, I wouldn't call it cooperation, but working with the military in Afghanistan and Iraq was a disaster. I mean, they had a totally different mindset. With State Department, development in a box, the Holbrooke strategy, I mean, these are disasters. And AID wasn't able to set its strategy. It was set for us. I'm hoping that our role is a little bit independent, or at least we have a say in our strategy instead of getting directions from the military and the State Department.
Let's take one more. Why don't we just stay right here, Galen?
Hello, my name is Carl Derrick, and my question relates to the overall approach to achieving organizational effectiveness, efficiency, the idea that we're shifting, transforming to greater private sector engagement, local solutions. But at the same time, there's the issue of earmarks. And my question is, to the legislative side, how do you see earmarks playing into promoting a greater organizational efficiency and effectiveness?
Great. So I'm going to let any of you answer any of those. And I do want to say, I mean, the first 2 being comments, they still merit a reaction if anyone has reactions. I think these...
Can I react to the point on the military? That's exactly the problem. And I think if a more robust USAID that is capable of dealing with both the State Department and the Defense Department, that is stronger in the interagency process, I think you can have a debate about cabinet level or what part of the NSC is the appropriate spot, and that debate is kind of happening. But that's exactly the issue that we should fix. We can't pretend that in a place like Afghanistan, the role of the military isn't going to be primary. It is. the military should already have a very functioning, and this is starting to happen under both the last two administrations, and I'm sure will continue, but there should be a very functional relationship between USAID and the Defense Department that makes sure things like that are mitigated as much as possible. And I think giving the agency that we care about a bigger ally at defense to go along with our mostly good ally at state can only help the situation.
Others on any of those issues?
I'll just talk about the earmarking. And I'm a recovering appropriator, and so I've done my fair share. It was great. Congress earmarks mostly because they don't trust the administration to do what they think is the best thing to do. So when we talk about the sort of the strategic transitions and the metrics-based approach or metrics-informed approach, what we're trying to say is that, take Malawi. If we look at Malawi and the metrics are showing that the capacity is strong in 7 of the 8 sectors, but governance is really the problem, then we can go to Congress and say, hey, you agree with me that the metrics work, that this is the right approach, and the solution is ultimately the right solution. And I'm just being honest, in fact, governance is what I need. I have a lot of education money, and that's delightful, and I'm happy to spend it, but I really need governance. Then that allows for that conversation. This is not an overnight solution. This is a long-term conversation to build trust between the agency and Congress that, one, we're actually funding the things that build capacity, and two, that we're going to be responsive to the desires of the legislative branch.
And I would have to say that that's what we wanted for quite some time, at least in Senator Isaacson's office. And to kind of follow on with that, I mean, I've just lost my train of thought. But at the end of the day, I mean, we want to see those results. We want to see the outcomes, not necessarily the outputs. And we want to, here's where it was. We need to stop authorizing through appropriations, I think, is part of the issue. Senator Isaacson led the Global Food Security Act, and it was a way to authorize and codify Feed the Future, and I think we want to keep doing more and more of those kinds of things so that you can have a congressional, authorization and then appropriate to that. I know that that's something that we've worked on for the last few years in the Foreign Relations Committee, and I think we want to see continue to see a more robust process in that as well.
I agree with Jim that it is basically a reflection of the lack of trust. But I think that the problem is going to get worse, not better, because very frankly, Democrats and people in the development community are very concerned that if they don't specify with great clarity that the money must be spent and how it must be spent, that it won't be spent at all. And so people who even agree with the negative impacts of earmarks and directives, and understand we've got to a place where I don't even know why we're doing country development cooperation strategies, because it's like a farce. We say what we want to do, and then the money's not there to implement what we've just agreed we want to do. But the fear is so great that the money won't be spent, or that it will be spent in the wrong ways, that even the people who recognize the damage being done by directives are now stepping back from that. And groups that there had been sort of an agreement that came out of the last foreign aid effort that I worked on and from MFAN, that the groups were not going to ask for more earmarks, that we would not support new earmarks. That's gone away, and everybody's asking for new earmarks.
I'm tempted to tease out this authorizer versus appropriator issue more, but I'm doing the numbers, and Jim is greatly outnumbered on this panel. There's a bunch of authorizers, former authorizers.
I like both.
Okay. Let's go to this side. Any hands over here? Or in the middle, actually middle back there too.
I may be somewhat out of touch on things, but I wonder, for the future of USAID personnel and the skills which are needed, would it be possible to set up a way to institutionalize taking of a sabbatical so that people can retrain and acquire the skills which are needed. I know that over my own career within USAID that I have needed 2 or 3 times to basically do some retooling, and it would be a big help if there were a more institutionalized process for doing that.
Thank you. I'm Mike Crosswell, and I worked for a long time on policy and aid up through the end of the Obama administration. And so we've heard discussions this morning about mechanisms. A lot of the initial debate on foreign aid has been about organization and budget. And we've heard about strategic transitions. And to some extent, all this makes sense if we have a clear development goal, commonly understood economic and social transformation of poor countries. And if that's a common goal, we could talk about all those things. How well do they serve this goal? But it seems to me that there's an agenda for foreign aid that extends way beyond development. I mean, if we're only development, why did we hear about a $45 million program in Mexico? Okay, OECD member. We have global health, we have environmental issues, we have strategic states that we're supporting. I haven't heard much about fragile states and fragility, but quite a different challenge than development. So my question is, to the 5 of you, if each of you wrote down what you think are the core goals of foreign aid, would there be agreement? Would it be the same list? And if not, sort of how can you talk about transitions or talk about organization until you make sure you're in line on goals? Thank you.
I'll list one priority for U.S. foreign aid, that it should be to advance U.S. national interests. And that's, again, something that may not be super popular, but we can't divorce the bulk of the 150 account from what is actually in the interest of our country. And I think, in this administration, there's going to be a focus on that. In this Congress, there's going to be a focus on that. But that doesn't mean a lot of the activities that we think of as, the poorest of the poor or, poverty-focused development, things like that aren't going to happen. They are, but I think we do have to look at it through a lens of what's actually in our country's interest before we do anything else.
One of the things that I've raised in a bunch of writings and so forth is, and my critique of a lot of the foreign aid reform plans that have come forward is conflating development with foreign aid. Development is one purpose out of many of foreign aid, and it's one stream of funding, one agency. There's this whole world of different things, whether it's security assistance, there's a big world out there, and many of the proposals are to put USAID in charge of all assistance. And I don't think that the USAID administrator should be making decisions about FMF and IMED and military assistance. So I think we need to remember that development is one important purpose of foreign aid, but it's not the whole thing.
I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I would concur with both points. First and foremost, our job in Congress is to be a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And so that should go to serve what is in the interest of our country. And then beyond that is to look at foreign assistance on that spectrum of humanitarian assistance, development assistance, strategic and security assistance, that those all serve different purposes in serving our nation's interests.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say there's lots of, obviously aid does operate in fragile states. We do it somewhat well. I think we have a long ways to go to get to strengthen that capacity. Fragility and conflict is not a dying thing. It's only increasing, unfortunately. And so we're going to get better at that. Obviously, humanitarian assistance is a huge part. But from an aid perspective, development is the core of what we do. And when we talk about strategic transitions, as it relates to development objectives, we understand that you could use development and foreign assistance more broadly than to meet the end, ending the need for assistance. From our perspective, when we talk about a metrics-based solution to set up for strategic transitions, we understand that we are going to be honest with everybody that a country has reached a capacity where they could continue, where they could go off on their own, and we could focus our relationship through trade and private sector engagement. The decision may come back to us from Congress or from the State Department or from the White House that says, no, we have a political objective here. That's completely fair. I mean, we're not trying to set up that there aren't lots of reasons to do development and that development can't be used for lots of different things. But we think the bulk of our programming and how we want to think about advancing the U.S. national interest is to build capacity, to build partners, to build, to build up local solutions in these countries. And so we are trying to talk about that honestly, but we understand that there are lots of different reasons that you would potentially be in a country that isn't necessarily purely development oriented.
Maybe I'll just observe on this other question of sabbaticals that, in fact, here at CGD, we have a sabbatical program for USG actors. It's been hugely valuable to us. My perspective, it's been valuable to the individuals and their agencies. It is very difficult to make it happen in each and every case, which suggests to me that these agencies are not set up to accommodate something like that very readily, and I think it is something that ought to be exploited more. I think it greatly deepens the human capital that we have in our government workforce. We can do a last round, I think, if there are any last questions, or if you are other. Yes, we do. Okay, there's Alex here, and then in the back.
Thank you very much to the panel for this prognosticating and thinking about where we're headed. Some of us are old enough to remember when the policy function and the budget function were together in AID, and we tended to think that was a fairly important combination if you really wanted to influence what was going on and have some control. At the same time, this was prior to the time of the enormous proliferation of agencies around town who have been carrying out aid assistance programs, but under their own budgets. I don't know whether, Jim, you're in a position to say anything about what the prospects are there, but or whether all these consensus documents on reform that have emerged where there seems to be a lot of consensus, as you've described, as everybody on the panel has described. We're not talking about bringing IMET into AID, but the combination of having budget authority and having brought back from state, that is, in a way that is much more responsive to the policy questions, and some greater control over the way in which money is spent around the government on these development efforts. Is there a prospect that that could happen in this reform effort?
Let's take this question in the back.
All right, well, this is probably should be the last question. How about prognostications on funding for family planning and global climate change in the new administration?
Okay, a second round on those two issues. And let me just suggest, I don't see any other hands, so please take the opportunity if you have any wrap-up comments, anything you wish to address that you didn't address, this is your chance.
Great. First, I'll just say thank you for inviting the administrator and me, and I don't know if there was other people from AID here. So thank you. We want to be open. As the administrator mentioned, we do have restrictions placed on us by the State Department and OMB as to how much we could share about what we're doing. We are always pushing the envelope. And the administrator is committed to pushing that envelope. So thank you for bearing with us as we go through this. We will provide additional information as soon as we can. We want this to be a collaborative process, and we'll look forward to doing that. I'll just say on the F question, the question about F, the administrator's views are fairly clear, and I don't know what the final determination is going to be and whether we can actually make progress. But we think F and the ability for the Secretary to coordinate on a strategic level is very good. And to your point, there are a lot of people who do foreign assistance. It's not just state aid, and empowering the Secretary and whatever organization he needs to sit with him to help coordinate and understand how budgets gets rolled up, and so that he can or she can look and say, yes, I know how much democracy spending is happening in Albania. That'd be fantastic, and we want to make sure that that continues. I do think the administrator is concerned about the bifurcation of his budget, and the fact that, I mean, we do, the administrator thinks that AID's budget formulation, execution, allocation functions isn't necessarily a core thing for F to do, and that's in fact, we don't believe that was the original desire for F, and we don't think that's a necessary function for them to do, and we think there's a lot of inherent goodness in sort of reunifying AID's budget in that way, and so we'll have those conversations, and we'll make the case that we think ultimately that type of function could come back to AID, and we think that'd be a good thing. But as to whether it would happen, we don't make the final determinations, and so we'll make the case, and we'll be honest. Again, it's always about honest, being forthright, and being aggressive, and that's what we're committed to doing. So,
Ryan?
Oh, okay. I don't really. It's in a black box for us too. We're not going to know what's going on with this process for quite some time until the next budget request comes out, most likely, and that will be where the answers to your question will be as well. I think to that question, my boss wants to see strong strategies around issues such as maternal and child health, nutrition, food security, and then we'll go from there. In kind of closing, I think I think we are at a point where Congress is really standing ready to work on tough questions of reform and to help answer those questions. And I certainly want to see that through to fruition. What that looks like ultimately, I know it's up for debate of who will have that final decision, but that's just the way the checks and balances work, I think, sometimes. So I don't know, thank you for having us here, and thanks again.
I'll go out on a limb, way out on a limb, on the family planning and climate change question, and predict that those earmarks will go up if Democrats get elected to control the House or the Senate or both, and that it's a purely partisan political decision. And if they don't, they'll probably stay right about where they are now.
Yep.
Diana, you get the last word.
All right. Well, 2 quick points. One, back to the issue of HR that was raised. And I think that there's a recognition on all parts, both in the administration and in Congress, that there has to be more focus on training and opportunities for rotations, for exchanges, for fellowships, for all these kind of things. What I don't think people have come to grips with is the cost of this, not just how much it costs for somebody to enroll in a course, but that you need to have float. You need to have extra people to cover those jobs while people are being trained. And in fact, we're going the other way. There's the hiring freeze, there's empty positions. So how do you let people out for training? So that's to the HR. And on the climate change and family planning, let me just say I'm much more optimistic about the final numbers that will come out for the 150 budget than for the issues that a lot of people care about. I still think there's going to be a cut. I don't see any world where we're going to hit FY17 numbers in FY18. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I think we're going to see cuts, maybe not 30%, but maybe 5%. But you look.
Well, at the end of the day, we have to get past December 15th. That's
But-
honest.
But you know, you look at the House and the Senate appropriations bills, the words climate change do not appear anywhere. It's a partisan thing, and as long as Republicans control both houses, that's what we're going to have to deal with. So.
Your marks.
On that note, this really was an excellent panel, really a lot of insight that I garnered, so please join me in thanking all four of them.